Welcome to another episode of Friends Let's Discuss. It's good to be back. We have a packed episode. We're going to try and crack through it and make this episode as energetic and informative as we can. And so, gold is green obviously happened. It was a big deal, but what we want to do is look at how a few things that connect to it. So, UK local elections are coming up May 7th, a few days away now. We're recording Monday the 4th. So, I think the closeness, the proximity of these attacks, I think, are going to be relevant. We also want to look at energy dependency in the UK and how that affects the cost of living crisis. And then, of course, how it all relates to the US-Israeli war that's taking place in Iran at the moment. But first, as always, a quick human check. Mira, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, love. Yeah, really good, actually. Yeah, although I have to say, I had a really strange dream the other day about Hassan Piker. And I don't know if we were watching, I don't know if I've started watching these kind of sort of Murder, She Wrote style mysteries. So apparently Hassan Piker and I were on some kind of like detective mission in the English countryside. It was very strange. I woke up and I was like, maybe I'm watching too much Hassan Piker and or detective shows set in the Cotswolds.
And I can see that happening, and I think that would make for an excellent TV series. I would watch the hell out of that. Netflix, if you're watching, please make this happen. Just for me. Just for me. You get one viewer guaranteed. What? Did you find out who the murderer was?
No, it didn't kind of get to that. We just seem to be just running around constantly and in different pubs. And I feel like the underlying premise, which just shows how sort of pervasive what you consume during the day is. I feel like the underlying premise was a democratic socialist candidate had gone missing.
Yes. Yes. Don't give any more of the script away because someone's going to take this and run with it.
Made me laugh so much. I was watching him yesterday. I thought, wait a second. Oh yeah, I think I'd had a dream about Hassan Piker. Yeah, hilarious. But anyway, so yeah, I'm doing fine, love. How about you? Good weekend?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. Obviously, it's the bank holiday weekend here in the UK, which means that later today, my daughter's having some sort of play date. And, at some point, like one of the parents of my daughter's school friends are going to see this. I don't know who their children are, and often I don't know who the parents are. Like we were in Costco's the other day. Thank God the child was still in her school uniform. She said hello to my daughter, and my daughter said hello back. And I didn't know if it was a mum I had already met before, or it was the first time I had met the mum. I had my sunglasses on though, so I was just gave the polite smile, like. But then I came back and I checked with my wife. I was like, "Is this someone that I should know, or someone that I don't know? Like, tell me, what type of relationship do we have with this family?" And apparently, it's a new girl. So it's not someone I'm really supposed to know at this stage, but
Phew.
I might need to put like Polaroid photos on the wall and like names and identities and just when you have the string that connects everyone together, I might have to start doing that so I know what's going on. But yeah, there's a
Like a
little
murder mystery, like a TikTok detective.
and we're coming back to this whole detective theme of today. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, like I said, there's a play date later today. Often the way the play dates go is that the mum brings over the child and the mums, just talk and the kids play, and I just stay in a room. I'm playing hip hop music and I'm like trying to play the non-explicit version, and then I get annoyed by not actually hearing the words that I want to hear. And so then I play the words that I do want to hear, and then the child knocks at the door. I'm like, oh shit, turn that down.
Damn it.
But I think today, like, the dad might be coming, so I don't know if it means I have to like do small talk with the dad, or just still pretend that I'm not here. I'm weighing up which I'm gonna do.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's probably the former, to
I
be honest with you.
don't need to let me get away. Like my wife would just be like, "No, come and speak to the dad and
That's
speak to the
it. Yeah, I
family."
feel like your missus would kill you.
We'll see. We'll see.
My brother-in-law does the same thing, love. He hides out with his headphones when my niece has a play date. It's super entertaining.
Yeah, like, and that's the thing. Like, obviously, as a girl dad, you're like, okay, there's not really much I can do here, and it'd be weird if I was that interested in other people's children. So, like, I feel like this is the default. Like, this is how you should be. But I don't know if the world would look differently upon me. Do you know what I mean?
Fair enough. Yeah, it's kind of a hard line, isn't it, really? It's a tricky one.
A tricky one. But, as long as my daughter's
You know,
happy, right? You know,
that's the main thing,
that's
love.
the main thing.
Always, always. Exactly.
All right. Well, I'm glad you're well. Shall we get into it? I think for us, the Golders Green attack, as we're calling it, is probably the major news event that took place. And a lot of things came out from that. And I guess what would be the most sensible thing to do, and feel free to correct me if you feel differently, is to try and lay out the broad facts as has been reported at this point, and then build out from there. Does that feel like the right way to go about it?
Yeah, definitely.
So the attack happened on Wednesday of last week. So what we know is that a man who has a history of mental health issues and serious violence initially attacked what we're assuming was his friend, someone he knew for 20 plus years. And that attack took place in Southwark, South London. He then travelled to North London to Golders Green, an area which I guess is fair to say is densely populated by people of the Jewish community. He lunged at one man with a knife and cut his throat, and the man was bleeding quite seriously but has survived. And then, in a similar fashion, went for another guy a few moments later, and then ultimately he was apprehended by the police, who two police officers fired tasers at him. He fell to the ground. He was still holding the knife, being told to let go of the knife. When he didn't let go of the knife, the police began to kick him. A member of the public also joined in trying to disarm the man. And eventually he was brought into custody. All this happened before midday on Wednesday. Is that broadly a fair account of what happened?
Yeah, love. It is.
Um, Worth adding that the two Jewish men that were attacked, one was aged 34 and one was aged 76. Both are thought to be expected to make a full recovery, thankfully. As a result, a lot of people have labeled this as a anti-Semitic attack, and the UK terror threat level was increased. And I believe on Sunday, uh, the man was charged with 3 counts of attempted murder. There's been lots of protests as a result, and a lot of people have come out to say that actually, these anti-Semitic attacks were on the rise in the UK and were inevitable, and there hasn't been enough protection for the Jewish community. I think it's probably worth adding also that while a lot of people have felt like the Jewish community haven't been properly protected, you've had people like Zach Polanski come out and say that the way the police disarmed the man by kicking him whilst he was on the ground was excessive use of force. And other people have pushed back on that and sort of said, actually, protecting the Jewish community was the greatest priority of the police in that instance. Is that a fair summation of everything that took place, all the major points?
Yeah. I think initially when the news initially came out, there was only 2 victims of the attack that were covered by the press in Golders Green. And it was only, I'd say, probably a good couple of days later before the 3rd victim was identified, when the police brought charges on that Sunday, I think you said. I think, and again, because of the way it was handled in the press, again, the theories and the pushback starts, because, is it an anti-Semitic attack if the Muslim friend of this perpetrator wasn't mentioned? So that's obviously one thing. The second thing, yes, for sure, Zach Polanski, essentially he retweeted something on X, which basically was a critique of how the police had perhaps used excessive violence in that situation. I saw him yesterday on, I think it was, oh God, that absolute bellend, Trevor Phillips, I think he's on Sky or something, that interview. And he said, look, I hold my hands up. I shouldn't have done that. I should have instead express my concerns directly to the police commissioner. I've got a meeting with him now. That would have been a much better way to handle it. I hold my hands up and say, obviously, sharing something on X wasn't the right thing to do. So fair enough. You don't credit to him for shouting, for saying essentially that. The other pieces, which again, I think, oh God, it's so emotional, this whole piece, right? Because then the day after this happened, Keir Starmer immediately pledged £25 million to providing additional safety for Jewish people, particularly, I think, in Golders Green or perhaps other areas of similar ilk. The UK threat level, as you say, was really increased to severe. And he came out with this mad speech, honestly. And I find myself like, it's really rare for me to feel like I want to commit violence because I'm a pacifist. But I was watching that speech just like, honestly, what the effing hell are you talking about? And there are so many things in it that were just wrong. And what they've decided to do essentially is use this as a way of effectively blaming the pro-Palestine anti-genocide marches, to say, like, you are the reason you've raised the threat level. And the challenge with it is, love, if this had been 25 years ago, you probably would have just got away with it. The vast majority of people who were influenced by the propaganda machine of mainstream media would have been like, oh, yeah, oh God, I can't believe that's happened. It's terrible. You know, it's really or evil. And what are these people doing? And, you know, it's really sad what's happened. But I think the challenge is, when you do it now, when people are so much more informed, and again, not as, unfortunately, they had these mental people on all these ridiculous talk shows, as you know, I absolutely hate, the extremes again, saying, oh, it's because you all are getting the Hamas propaganda, you're all Hamas, you know, blah, blah. But all you do is just further alienate people who really are just trying to educate this. And again, the vast majority of people on these marches, from the images that I've seen, people like you and me, are just British people who are empathetic, some of whom are religious and have been raised with kindness, tolerance, peace, and love, who see the violence being perpetrated against the Palestinian people in front of our eyes, and are just saying, listen, why are we supporting this? Like, this is wrong. Like, why are we supporting? And then you're essentially attacking those people for saying genocide is wrong, and then blaming the violence to another community. And I think it is just so enraging, love. But what's scary is we can be annoyed, but we can separate all of these pieces. I can separate that I have a love for Jewish people, as I do with people of any faith or non-faith, because I'm a human being who cares about other human beings. I have an understanding that not all Jewish people back the Israeli government in the actions that they're currently committing that's a genocide. I can recognize that there are people that attend the demonstrations that maybe go a little bit too far to the right. And incidentally, they're not just Muslim people. There are also white people that unfortunately are anti-Semitic, like actually anti-Semitic, and would agree with the Nazis. I can see all those things and still be able to identify a nuance between what I personally think Starmer said, which was anti-Semitic, which is essentially saying that by being pro-Palestine, you're anti-Semitic, which implies that every single Jewish person in the world is responsible for the actions of the state of Israel. That, to me, is anti-Semitic. Do you
Yeah.
see what I mean? Like,
Yeah, it's massive because, as you said, look, we know there's a number of bad actors involved in any protest that takes place. There's a number of people that are trying to inflame an incident and make something much bigger than it is, and pushing towards what would be a negative outcome for what the broader goal of the protest would be. So yes, there will be pro-Palestinian marches where people will be saying awful, abhorrent things that neither me or you agree with, and the majority of the people doing the peaceful protest would agree with. I've got no issue with policing that, but sort of tying it all to saying that we're just going to cancel all pro-Palestinian marches, when we're clear, everybody can see that a genocide is taking place, right? Not only is Palestine being bombed, but now Lebanon as well, like right under our noses, without getting the type of coverage that you would expect to see. So to say to these people that we're not going to allow you to protest in a country that still should have free speech, that still should have the right to peaceful protest, that being said by the Prime Minister, is a big issue and something that I feel like this is the type of mistake that Keir Starmer continues to make, where he's so quick to pander to one side and doesn't take a level-headed, calming approach. He actually inflames the situation rather than saying this is something that we're addressing. We want to look after all people, especially those that are being targeted at any point, as opposed to just saying, no, we're going to stop pro-Palestinian marches. Like, why would you? There's no need to say that. There's no
And
need.
it doesn't make sense. And again, part of the problem I think as well is because when the Black Lives Matters protest happened in America post George Floyd, right, the same narrative was pushed by a lot of the right-wing media. Oh, they're violent. Look at the looting. Look at the violence. The police were so heavy-handed. But actually then when the post-mortem happened afterwards, and the papers obviously barely covered it, but I was reading it, 97% of those protests were peaceful. Only 3% of those people took advantage of the situation and did some looting and caused some criminal damage, etc., etc. Is that what we're saying? Firstly, is that what we're saying now, where the 3% effectively represent like everything? Like, that's mad. The second thing I think, love, is I agree with you. He's just so crap at this. Like, he's so freaking bad. And every time I try to think, like, maybe, like, you know, could he do it? And then he does something like this, and I'm just like, bruh, get the F off the stage, because you are so unbelievably bad at this. What he should have said was, there is no excuse for this attack. We understand, but the police investigation is currently ongoing, that we suspect this is anti-Semitism. That is not acceptable. We do not target any faith in this community on the actions maybe of happening elsewhere. In the same way that Muslims were not responsible for the actions of Al-Qaeda and 9/11, Jewish people are not responsible for the actions of this Israeli government and the IDF. Like, you could have said it in a way that didn't diminish the violence that had happened, which was straight up wrong, but also didn't alienate everybody else who was kind of in their own eyes watching this genocide unfold, and be honest. And you're not going to be honest enough. You're not like our friend Pedro Sanchez in Spain. You're not like Mark Carney, obviously, in Canada. You're not going to be honest enough because that's not who you are. You're not going to be honest enough to say, yes, Israel are committing a genocide, because that's not who you are. You're never going to do that, let's be honest. But you could have just done it in any other way except this. Honest, it's rare. Like I said, I'm a pacifist. It's very rare for me to genuinely want to throw something at the television. I was so close, and I was just like, it's an expensive TV, so I'm just going to leave it.
Yeah, there's a real inability for Keir Starmer to thread the needle, you know, and I think it's one of those rare qualities that perhaps we don't appreciate as much as we should. And maybe it's not something that most politicians go into public life thinking that that's what they need to hone. But if you're going to be the mouthpiece of the nation, you can't say something like that and it not land in the right way. And so we're not in an age where you can just control what's being shown in the newspaper to the extent that you were able to maybe 40, 50 years ago. People can see a genocide taking place. We can see Gaza has been flattened. We can see that Lebanon is being attacked. And so to say that you can't have a pro-Palestinian march, and bear in mind, pro-Palestine doesn't mean anti-Jew,
Exactly.
right? And I think that's the distinction where they're conflating the two.
Yes.
unnecessarily, right?
And dangerously.
And
It's
it's caused
insidious.
more problems, right? And so really what we need is someone that actually dampens the flames. And instead he's throwing petrol on it, which is nuts to me. And as close as we are to these UK local elections, as we spoke about last week, some people will use this up as an opportunity to make a protest vote. When I looked at the predictions for the area that I'm in, we're currently a Conservative borough. It's looking like Reform are going to win by a slight majority. So, I'm in a position where, like, if everything was equal, I probably would have voted for the Liberal Democrats. I know I can't risk splitting the vote and placing that vote there. It's going to have to be a Conservative vote to avoid Reform, or actually hope that we avoid Reform taking seat in this local council. But this is a situation that Keir Starmer has caused, and so now we're sort of looking at whether Andy Burnham becomes the next candidate for Labour leadership, because he has been more charismatic, has spoken with more eloquence, has been able to land points far better than Keir Starmer's been able to in his time. Which again, I've said it before, but I would rather there wasn't that instability in our government. But it feels like, this guy has had every opportunity to show that he is the best guy for the job and just hasn't. Just hasn't.
He just hasn't love. And and the things you can forgive the dullness and the delivery if what's saying, and I think this is the piece, and I can't speak for everyone, of course, just the sense that I get is what people are desperate to connect to with politicians is a degree of authenticity, like, or even just truth. Now, I struggle, like Farage gives you the impression of it, but obviously he just constantly lies, right? And I think, again, even Zach Polanski, you probably noticed in the last week in particular, they have been coming after him. The mainstream media, other politicians, everyone jumped on him for retweeting something on X. Just to put that in perspective, he is the only Jewish political leader in this current group of five. It is wild to accuse him of anti-Semitism, which again, in and of itself, is just insane, right? As a thing, it doesn't make any sense. Um, and then the coverage as well, love, that I've just been seeing again in the mainstream media, they're just going after him. Like I watched this. Unfortunately, my mum was watching it, so I ended up having to get stuck because usually I can't stand this guy. And the Trevor Phillips interview that Zach Polanski did was one of the wildest things I've honestly seen in a long time. He uh, he essentially at one point, what Polanski was trying to say is essentially there is perception and then there's reality. It's understandable people feel more scared and people feel like anti-Semitism is on the rise and they're more afraid to leave their houses. That's horrible. There's also the reality that isn't necessarily manifesting in the way that one says. So anyway, he answers the question and then Trevor Phillips says something to the tune of, so sorry, what you're saying is then that perception is not reality.
Bro.
Just to leave that with you guys for a second, because again, we'll put the clip on, but just to say something to the effect where a so-called journalist on a mainstream media program utters the phrase to a future political candidate, are you trying to say that perception is not reality?
I think the shocking thing about it is that there was a time where there was so much high regard for journalism, and both from the journalist point of view and from the viewer's point of view, the person who consumed the journalistic content, that each question was like thoroughly thought through. Like there was more to that the engagement between the politician and the journalist in trying to just like get a gotcha moment.
That's it.
I think unfortunately, Sky is a pay-per-view channel, right? And so essentially they're trying to make as much money as possible, and they know that the more viewers they get, then the more money they make, the more they can charge for advertising. And so Trevor Phillips is being asked to get something controversial out there, get something that isn't exclusive, get something that gets clicks and shares. And the clicks and shares are a bigger metric than the truth at the moment, you know. And this is a scary time that we're living in, and this is something that we all have to negotiate, right? This is something that we all have to deal with. It's like when we're consuming content, the people on one end are less concerned about the responsibility of giving a fair and accurate representation of what's going on, and more interested in driving engagement. Like engagement is king at the moment, which is a scary place to live when there's a war going on, right? You know, there's one of the most powerful nations in the world going from country to country and bombing with impunity, you know, and that's not what we're talking about. Like, we're talking about the Green Party spokesperson retweeting a post and that being called less than reality. Like, this, it's a weird place to live in, you know?
So weird. The double standard doesn't have it. And there's something that Sam Piker said, which I thought was brilliant, which was something like these people acting like stenographers instead of journalists. And like that to me is genius because it's so true, love. Like how much of the stuff that gets reported is just regurgitated. Like even I was watching again a clip on these god awful talk quote unquote talk shows, and it was something like, oh, you know, the vast majority of the people on these pro-Palestine marches are hate Jewish people, and they're there because they hate Jewish. But sorry, where is your evidence of that though? Like where exactly do you get that? And I think this is where, like, even, you know, someone as far back as Jeremy Corbyn, who instantly, you know, I am still got a lot to learn. I will hold my hands up to be very uneducated about the extremely complex history of Israel and Palestine, but I'm trying to learn more and more. But up until probably about 5 years ago, or even 3 years ago, I genuinely thought, like most of the British public, that the Palestinians were the aggressors and that the Israelis were the ones who were oppressed, because that's what we were brought up with. That's what we were taught and we were told over and over and over again, and how the wording and the words and the type of framing that was used in the press was always to that extent. And it's just, I think it's just because once your eyes are opened, it's very difficult to go back, love.
It's one of the frustrations I have, like the way history was taught at,
Yeah.
you know, GCSE level. I don't know if they still do GCSEs these days. It's probably called something else.
Whatever, I don't.
But like, it was such a dull, boring class, and I really struggled with history. It was just not interesting.
Same.
Where if you actually look at modern history, it's so interesting, so informative as to why we are where we are today. And it feels like if we had taught it properly, we could avoid so many of the complex literally taking place today, because everybody would have a greater understanding. And maybe, like, I'm assuming too much. Maybe like the powers that be are well aware of what's going on, but for the voting public, for the average person in a democracy, to not understand modern history, and I'm not talking about ancient history, because obviously, you know, the Palestinians are being referred to in biblical texts, so, you know, like several thousand years ago, right? But modern history of Palestine, like, there's a book you're reading. I don't know if you want to briefly talk about it, or I know you're about to start reading
Let's
it.
start it. Yeah, because even something simple like that, like to Fabian's point, I'm just about to start reading The Future is Peace, by an Israeli gentleman and a Palestinian gentleman who are peace activists, effectively, and both had suffered under the occupation and October the 7th. But honestly, like I just sort of flipped, just because I'm reading Cuckoo Land at the moment by Tom Burgess, which is amazing. But anyway, I flipped a bit, and I showed Fabian the first 2 pages they've got is a land map of Palestine and Israel when it was under the British Mandate, so pre-1945, after the NABCA in 1947, when the United Nations, effectively the lines had to be kind of redrawn, and then 1967, obviously after the horrific offense attack by Israel then, and then where they sort, and not even where they sort of are now, because that's obviously, it's even worse now than it was. But again, like, it's just such a fascinating visualization, which sort of captures, pardon me, what a lot of the people who are now educated about this situation are trying to say. Like the history is such that when there had been migration, as I understand it, even as much earlier the 1930s with the pogroms, obviously in Eastern Europe, and Jewish people being forced out there and severe violence, they moved into Palestine. So British Mandate Palestine. As I understand it, there were tensions, but ultimately the Arabs and Jews live side by side. But as with anything, like with exactly what's happening in the UK right now, with 100,000 asylum seekers, there were tensions. People were like, wait a second, there's all these new people are coming in, like what's going on? Like, do we have enough, etc. And then obviously after the Second World War, large influx of Jewish people came in. In the meantime, the British, under the Balfour Declaration, has essentially given away Palestinian land to the Israelis, to what then became the Israeli state. Sorry, pardon me. Anyway, so then fast forward, and then Israel starts, it's attacking its neighbors, supposedly under defense or preemptive action or whatever it's called. More and more land gets taken. In the Nakba in 1947, at least 800,000 Palestinians were expelled from their home. So when we say expelled from their home, just to put it into context, right, love? This is like saying that a load of Syrian refugees came to Kent and basically went to homes in Kent, knocked on the door, turfed out the people who were living there, changed the locks, and took over their houses. So just to put it into context, right? Like, I am not here to, again, let's say that I understand fully all of this, but to me, would we have found that acceptable ourselves if that had happened to us? Like, we don't even like people coming here who are staying in shitty asylum hotels and want to just work and contribute to the country. We don't even like that. So anyway, so that's that. And then obviously, throughout the various histories and attacks, and then it's very complicated essentially. And the thing that strikes me with your point around history, love, is I think it was really important because we learn a lot about the Holocaust, right? And World War II at school. It is really important that that was done because the whole point of learning about these human stains, the fact that humanity can do these kind of evil things, is so that we don't repeat it again. So you understand how did we get to that situation where so many normal German people, pardon me, were complicit in this atrocity? How did we get to the situation where the Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge were able to kill so many Cambodians, massacre, genocide, so many Cambodians, Milosevic in Yugoslavia? Instantly going back, the genocide that was committed against the Native Americans, that is very rarely talked about as well, by the way. But the whole point is never again means never again for anyone. And that's why I would say, to be fair, that the vast majority of just normal people like you and me who are watching this unfold are like, but wait, we studied this. We don't want another genocide to happen because it was a horror show. Like, we should not be behaving like that as humans. So why are we having to now be silent at this point?
Makes no sense.
I just don't get it.
It makes no sense. And I think that's the frustration that so many people feel, right? I've said it a couple of times already in this podcast. We can see what's happening. You're not pulling the wool over anyone's eyes. And yet you're saying that the people who are on the receiving end of this genocidal attack shouldn't have support from a nation that is democratic and has freedom of speech. Makes no sense.
It just
Makes no
doesn't make
sense.
any sense. It's just not aligned with our principles, love. And again, I know that there's complexity in this. The Jewish people have faced intergenerational trauma over the years, dating as far back as they say, the pogroms, and I'm sure before that as well. The what happened on October the 7th was a massive civilian attack. What happens in Golders Green was an attack. In that, nothing that we say will diminish the fact that that's a feeling that's understandable. I think the bit that I'm really curious about, and obviously I absolutely cannot speak to this because I'm not Jewish and I haven't been raised in a Jewish household, is sometimes I wonder, love, because when you're raised with that level of fear, if someone so much looks at you sideways,
Yeah, yeah,
God, oh my God, are they going to hit me? Are they going to attack me? Because I always joke like with my mom, because when she came in, so my mom actually grew up mostly on a British Air Force base in Asia, right? Because my granddad was in the RAF. So she's kind of most of her life grew up with white people, and then she came here and was experiencing racist abuse like constantly. She was like puzzled. But I think in a certain way, it sort of shaped sort of like a nervousness in her. So even when we would go, say, to like Cornwall or something, because we went every year, if people would walk past and like look at us, my mom would be like, "Oh my God, is it okay? Like, are we safe? Do you think we should go? Like, I'm not sure. Is this an okay area?" And I'd be like, "Mom, Jesus Christ, like it's fine. Like everyone's lovely. We've never had any issues." But I wonder at that, and it's not to diminish the history, love, or the persecution. I'm not saying that. I'm just wondering if, like, especially when you come out the back of the Second World War and that horror that was experienced and the trauma, like we talk about trauma, right? Now, and we talk about, you know, dealing with trauma and triggers and all that kind of stuff. So like even when you go from what is a very, very, very white country where you've experienced all of this trauma, and then you go into a country that isn't, frankly, it isn't your own country, right? You're going there. You may have had a historic connection, you feel, to the land through your religion, etc. But ultimately it's still a new place, right? It's not your place. You have to get acclimatized. It's a new climate. You're surrounded now by all of these brown people that have a different religion to you. And then is it that then? Like you just come with this trauma, this trigger state, and then you're looking like someone looks at you sideways and you're like, oh shit, oh my God. Everyone's trying to, I don't know. Like, am I just infantilizing it? Am I being unfair?
I don't think you're being unfair at all. And I think one of the things that, again, I'm still learning is that like the the makeup of Jews is broad, right? And so we, I guess, are more familiar with like European and European looking Jews, whereas there are Arab Jews that exist and have lived across the, Arabian Peninsula for millennia. And so, like when we talk about Jews, it's actually a much more complex thing than just the Jews that you know were 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 experiencing this abhorrent thing during the Holocaust. Like it's a much broader thing. So yeah, it's not a case of like all Jews look like European Jews. Some Jews will look like brown Arabs, as we're sort of more familiar with seeing. There's Jewish communities in East Africa, and they look like me, and they still claim Jewish descent. It's a weird thing, and it's again something that we probably to our, I guess, failing know too little about. It's something that we say on this podcast all the time. Is that do your own research and find out for yourself, because unfortunately no one's going to just give it all to you. No one's just going to break it all down for you. And so
Exactly.
there's work to be done for all of us to try and understand what's going on and make sense of it. Um, I, I know we spoke briefly about it, I guess, through messages. I don't know where this ends, where the conclusion is for this. It feels like, we spoke about the two-state solution, whether or not that was viable, and I think we had slightly different takes on it, but it's just unfortunate that this doesn't feel like this has um, a conclusion that we will see in my lifetime. It doesn't feel like that's going to be on the horizon anytime soon.
Yeah, I think it's tricky. And I think to go back, love, like as I understand it, the ideology of Netanyahu's right-wing cabinet is one of Zionism. And one of the core principles of Zionism is that they believe that that land was given to them by God, I guess 2000 or so years ago. So they believe that they have a God-given right to that land and to take it by any means necessary, which is why when you look at the internal polling within Israel, actually there is still positive reinforcement for the actions that Netanyahu's government is taking in its actions on Gaza and the West Bank. Not 100%, but obviously over 50% essentially. And I think that's where this whole thing becomes extremely, extremely tricky, because until someone stands up and says land rights in 2026 are not typically determined by what somebody said 2000 years ago, then this underlying ideology will keep continuing to believe that they can have actions without any kind of impunity, right? And what I feel sad about with the Palestinian people is they haven't just been experiencing this at the hands of the Zionists who have this ideology, but they've also been left by all of the Arab states surrounding them. I think the only exception is Iran and Turkey, that have tried to support them. And then obviously Hezbollah in Lebanon as well, who instantly were only created after the first invasion of Lebanon in the first place. And so again, that's another part of the history in there as well. But I think it's, to your point on a solution, I think it's going to be really tricky, love, because the Palestinians have been abandoned by pretty much everybody, really. And now America and Israel are attacking the only ally that the Palestinians have ever had. Now, you can argue the case, like, I have zero love for the IRGC. Like I say, I'm a pacifist. Like, I don't really want any war, to be honest. I think it's mad. And the reason I think the Americans are so keen on it is because they have a war machine that is extremely profitable off the back of it. But the challenge is, like, in a dream scenario, there would be a two-state solution. And then you rightly asked me the question, but Miz, are you trying to tell me that these people have to live side by side with the people that committed genocide against them? That's a great question.
I don't know how you do that, and that's the unfortunate thing about it. That's why I feel like it would take several generations of peace, and we can see how tenuous and fragile peace has been. Look, the podcast is called Friends Let's Discuss. We're only discussing. We're not in the position where we can actually make any difference to this, but hopefully, having this discussion in a democratic country can help to inform decision-making processes that do affect government policies in the future. I think one of the things for me is, like, a lot of this seems to be a second-order effect of the need to have energy and oil and other types of fuel. And that feels like US's motivation for going after Iran is some sort of oil play. And that seems to be also why the US has gone after Venezuela. We've also seen recently that Venezuela and Guyana is some sort of dispute over oil, with Guyana having recently found, I think it was sort of 2018, they found that they had a large amount of oil. But Venezuela are now like, well, maybe that oil should be ours. So there's this weird thing going on where if we weren't so dependent on these fossil fuels, maybe there would be a lot more peace in the world. Like, maybe if we had
No.
renewable energy, like, because all of this, like, if you think about all the major wars that the US has been involved in, a lot of it seems to have been related to oil. Like, am I off?
I love your optimism on that, love. But as again, to your point, I mean, history was taught to us terribly. But I'm trying to learn more about history, and to me, unfortunately, the human race just seems to find different reasons to hate on each other and fight each other. Like, even slavery was a man-made concept. Like, what is it that they say? Slavery was not born of racism, racism was born of slavery. Like, they literally created this concept of a racial hierarchy just to justify the enslavement of people. So, like, and that's after committing genocide on the Native Americans. And then after that, we had the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, obviously all America, but anyway, we had the Vietnam War. Then obviously Israel attacking Palestine for 75 years, and then we had all of the conflict in the Middle East that ultimately was linked to this situation. I just don't know. I think oil is a primary motivator of American dominance, but I don't think that having renewables will make us more peaceful. I think the challenge is in much of capitalism, because there's so much wealth in military action. There are too many people with a vested interest to continue the fighting and the conflict. Do you know what I mean, love?
I think it's interesting. So I guess when slavery is an interesting topic, because I think slavery, often when we talk about slavery, we mainly think about the transatlantic slave trade. And that was almost the most evil version of slavery that has ever been seen, which is why it sort of stands so clearly in the minds of so many people. One of the books I read, The Silk Road, Peter Frankopan, it was in that book where he spoke about the word slavery coming from Slavic. And so at that time, the Slavic people were thought to be the best slaves to own. And so in much of Rome, you would say, if I want a slave, it's going to be a Slavic person. And so that was a very normal process. And there's a number of instances of slaves in different parts of the world having different levels of rights within the society that they're in. And so slaves were a commodity, and you can sort of understand that it was just a cheap workforce in a similar way to where even today there are, we kind of export the workforce to countries where their economy is worse, and so we can charge less for the same output, right? It's just a different way that we leverage the economy. So it's one of those things where it's like that was a very useful commodity and highly valuable, and so people with greater force took advantage of it. And I think it's a similar sort of thing today, where with energy being such a major requirement, and part of that being related to the drive to have AI dominance, especially in the US, but also in other parts of the world. What you're seeing is that the people in Trump's ear, a lot of them are tech leaders, whether it be, your Elon Musk, whether it be your Mark
Sam Altman,
Zuckerberg
Mark
or
Zuckerberg, yeah.
Jeff Bezos, whoever it is, they're all
Mm.
tech leaders, and a lot of what they're doing is making money as a result of the AI boom, right? Whether it's by making chips, whether it's by having LLMs, whether it's by doing cloud computing, all of that is driving the US economy, and it's such a massive driver that if you took the top 7 tech stocks out of the US economy, it would look terrible, right? And so suddenly, so much of the US's identity is predicated on having these tech stocks, which are founded on energy consumption. And so much of the US energy is coming from fossil fuels. So much so that they're looking at like reinvesting in nuclear energy, because they're like, we can't just rely on fossil fuels going forward. We need other forms of energy, and nuclear is like an easy energy for them to start to think about. Weirdly, they're ignoring solar, wind, deep sea energy.
Especially in California, love. Like,
Right,
it's sunny most of the year in California. So like
exactly.
and you have the Pacific Ocean, which is one of the roughest oceans that I've
Yeah,
ever been
exactly.
in, to be honest. It just makes no sense. Yeah. Just
It would be super easy to use that and to invest in that, but instead, like you say, because there's such a massive investment historically in fossil fuels, especially oil, the US is like, okay, well, drill, baby, drill, right? And so, um, whether it's I don't know, BP shared their profits recently, and you can see like
oh.
absolutely disgusting the sort of profits that they made over this time. Um, and you can imagine how well and how much force they're able to lobby with when they're as wealthy as they are, especially as the way the US government operates. So, I mean, that is my rationale for thinking that if there was a greater reliance on renewable energy, we might have fewer wars and as a result, more peace. But I admit, like, that's my optimistic take on how things would play out.
But it's a lovely notion, love. And like I say, I am a pacifist. I just don't believe in the need for violence. I don't get me wrong. When I see some of the things that stories about a pedophile or that crazy rapist on those Sikh women, then I'm like, oh, bring back the death penalty. But like, normally I'm kind of a pacifist. But like, I think to your point though, I, if you take oil is one thing, but I think the next thing actually, love, is the materials, isn't it? Like the raw materials that are used to power all the batteries and stuff. Even the other day, there was the American government essentially operates like pirates right now, right? So they're just going around stealing, killing, just to steal resources. And they did something the other day. I forget who it was. Maybe it wasn't kind of in Cuba. It was another country anyway. Sorry, forgive me, guys. I'll have to look it up. But essentially the same thing. They just essentially, it's another level of piracy. We're going to attack you unless you just give us some of your materials. So like the tech companies, and again, Silicon Valley, like typically the ideology was, peace, love, freedom. This is the California that was used to be there. And now these are the guys that are happily complicit in facilitating a genocide, i.e. Palantir. You can share that story. Happily complicit in bribery and corruption, i.e. Apple giving $100 million to the ballroom. Happily complicit in the increasing dictatorship of the American government, all supported by these guys like OpenAI and Bezos, as he said. And there'll always be something, love, because people desperately want to be the top. Like, I feel like apparently as human nature, somebody needs to be dominant and oppress people. Like, I don't know is that just in our psyche or something? I don't know.
So slight divergence, just because of
Yeah.
my like weird topics of interest, is that I don't know if you've like looked into the actual history of piracy at all. No, because obviously the pirates that we're familiar with are just like the guys that are criminals that are on boats and they're stealing things and pillaging and raping whatever, whatever. But if you look into pirates, and I only know this from listening to like one podcast, so please do your own research. um, Pirates, some of them, it was actually quite like a mixed bunch. So Sir Francis Drake technically was a pirate, and he had effectively a license to pirate from the Queen. And so a lot of these people were out on the high seas doing things that were like effectively undercover operations ordained by the king and queen at the time. And so whilst we're all sort of really used to pirates just being complete villains, some of them were like, legitimately pirating. And then you have these other pirates who, again, obviously you have pirates that were actual criminals, but were criminals for like various reasons, some of which were just and some of which were unjust. And so you might have escaped slaves who form a pirate crew or join a pirate crew. You might have people that were in queer relationships and that was illegal at that time. You might have women who were on a pirate ship. So one of the examples was of a Chinese woman who was the captain of this pirate ship, and it was like one of the most feared pirate ships on the seas at that time.
Also.
And so there's quite a lot of diversity when we talk about like literal piracy, like literal pirates at, and in the time of the high seas was actually quite a broad thing and not necessarily as black and white as it's often portrayed.
Actually, so when you're saying that, I don't know, again, this is another tangent, love, sorry, but like, even as you're saying that, so we legitimize piracy for Sir Francis Drake. So this is Britain, right? So like, again, time of the empire, I'm guessing, and when we went around the world. But again, this is where I find it fascinating with kind of the hypocrisy of humanity. So in the pursuit of white supremacy, if you think about what the British and ultimately the Americans did, they pirated, legitimized piracy. But then when the Somalian pirates do it, you're like, oh, they're criminals, they're evil. Let's make films about them and let's Trump talk about how evil they are and they all need to leave America. And then when you talk about violence against civilians, so in the case of October 7th, Israeli civilians were killed. That is a travesty. It's a tragedy. It's violence of the Exeter order. 80 to 100,000 Palestinian civilians have been killed. that's collateral damage as a result of the war. When you have collateral damage, you are basically saying that it's an unforeseen consequence of war. And the reason is because Hamas are hiding, and there must be millions of them, honestly, because they're hiding in every school and every hospital and every tunnel and every house and flat and da-da-da-da. And yet the military installations also exist in Israel, in some of which in Tel Aviv, within the civilian population. So if the reverse had happened, would that have been acceptable? I'm going to guess no. International law has to apply to everybody else, particularly if you're brown or people of color. But if you're a white supremacist country, then international law doesn't really apply to you, and you can kind of just do what you want, and everybody should just be okay with it.
Yeah.
And do you know what I mean? Like,
We wrote the law, but we didn't mean it to apply to us.
exactly.
It's just you people with your dark skin.
That's it. And I was reading, love, about the other day on the United Nations veto, because I was trying to understand, like, why do those 5 countries have a veto? So UK, US, Russia, UK, France, and one other country, I think it's Italy. Those were the ones that essentially needed to come together to agree, because supposedly they're the ones that won the Second World War, and that's why they had the right to a veto. The idea being that they were the people that were the good people that essentially took us out of the nightmare that was the war, and therefore they can be the kind of paragons of upholding this international order. It's a little bit awkward, but I'm not really sure where we are now, because obviously Russia doesn't seem to be upholding any international law. America sure as hell isn't. And to be fair, you could argue it hasn't for a very long time, right? Because they could just go and invade countries with impunity. The UK is just passive because we are so beholden to so many other countries that we don't really have a point of view ourselves. And God knows under Starmer, who's the biggest wishy-washy weather vane, like there isn't one. And then the other two, like, I don't know, like France is just struggling with shit internally because its economy is struggling because of all of its major issues. I don't know, love, like is that what we invited another 160 countries, I think, to join the United Nations, and then we largely ignore what they say? How is this a realistic body that's going to kind of govern what is, inverted commas, right for humanity when it operates in this way?
It's an unsettling thing to think about, isn't it? Because it came together with such good intentions,
Exactly.
such like good virtues, and somehow over the time it's just eroded away to the point where you're like, I wouldn't trust any of these people with my pet cat, let alone with the safety of the world. Yes, unsettling thought just to land on. Um, Look, the last thing we wanted to sort of talk about, and we can be fairly brief on this, was just how all of what we've spoken about is impacting the cost of living. And one of the things that came out, I think it was as soon as this morning, was that food prices are set to rise by 50% since the start of the cost of living crisis, which was thought to have started in 2021. But a 50% increase in food prices. I mean, I don't know if you go, I mean, we enjoy going out to eat. Like, it's so expensive to go out to eat at the moment.
Expensive.
Like, one of my biggest frustrations about eating out in London is how everything is small plates, and each of the small plates costs what it used to cost for a full size plate.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, yeah, we recommend you order 3 small plates each. And you're like, what the you're just fleecing me at this point. Like, what am I doing? And like I say, like, obviously, we mentioned it previously, I was in Portugal a few weeks ago. And the south of Portugal is a beautiful place to go. It's the only place in Portugal I've been, but it is stunning. But you go to like a local roadside restaurant, and you get like a generous, delicious meal for the price of like, I don't know, I think most of the places we went, you could get like a full meal for like 15 euros. So a meal and a drink, like a full size, like I couldn't get over how cost effective it was, like, and it's good food. I'm like, how are they doing this?
I don't get it,
But
love.
it's just normal for them. Like we're the ones getting fleeced. So, I, I, I often say this, but we get so worked up about little things where actually these bigger events taking place in the world are what's really causing us to struggle and actually feel this discomfort that we're all experiencing at the moment. And we really need to be focused on that.
It affects it was the same thing in southern Spain when we went, love. Like, we were blown away. Think we had 2 bottles of wine between the 3 of us and a load of tapas, and it came to, like, £18 each. And we looked because we couldn't really speak Spanish well, so we were trying to use Translate. So we looked at the bill and we were like, "Oh my god, did they miss something out? Like, are we sure that they included everything?" I don't know why. Why is it so expensive here, though?
And then
I
I
don't
think
get it.
it's this weird thing where I guess as a nation we don't produce that much, we import a lot. And so I can only assume that we need to just buy local more. Um, and I guess it's also the cost of production going up when you look at things like fertilizer coming into the country and how so much of that comes from other parts of the world and is produced in other parts of the world.
But they don't use it either, love. So, like, in Spain and Portugal, like, how do they do it so cheap?
Well, and I can only assume it's because they're part of the EU, right? And
Oh, yeah, of course.
that
Sake. Yeah, the usual.
that thing.
2,000, I was just saying, I was reading an article the other day, £2,000 per household. They're probably, I'm guessing, I think it's about 40 million households in the UK. That's like £80 billion or something crazy that we've lost since Brexit.
And
It's
this is
absolutely insane.
And again, they were talking about the cost of going back into the EU being like 1 billion a year, which is a massive number. But when you compare it to, the 80 billion, you're like, oh, it's well worth it.
Is well worth it. And when you think about the social care bill and stuff that we spend, we're spending like $1 trillion on pensions and the NHS. So, like, in the grand scheme of things, like, that's nothing. If the return, the thing with the thing, this is Telegraph, right? The thing is, what they do is they only show you one side. But, as a finance person, when you consider an investment case, 1 billion versus how much you're going to generate off of that 1 billion. Like, how many small businesses are now going to be able to trade seamlessly? Avoid the checks. Maybe our food feels fresher. It's just not sitting in a truck for 3 weeks at the bloody border. And the thing is, love, I try to buy local. So I do, but the thing is, I recognize I am buying largely for myself.
Yeah,
Because the others in my family are vegetarian. So I'm the only one who buys meat, right, from the
right,
farm.
right.
But it's really
It's
expensive,
expensive.
love. Like, one British chicken breast costs £5 for one.
That's
Now, I
insane.
buy it because it's delicious and
Yeah.
I like to support British where I can. But I recognize that if you're a family of 4 or your family of 3, love, how on earth can you afford that? That's like 15 quid just for the chicken on your plate for a meal.
Like we're doing okay in terms of money, and like I still look at the Sainsbury's shop, and when I shop, I look at like the cost per kilo, the cost per whatever, and like there was like so there was a packet of soup mix, right? And it's just a packet. You add it to your vegetables, your chicken, whatever you're making, and it had like the cost per kilo for this packet of soup of like £34. I was like, not buying that soup. I don't need that flavor. You see, like the actual cost was like I don't know £1.50, but when you look at the cost per weight, and you're like, this doesn't make sense. Like, what? Why would I? Why would I do that? I don't need. I'll just have bland food. Like, I don't need it to be that well flavored. And so
Seriously.
it's this weird thing where even someone who arguably is in like the middle class category, I hate saying it because I'm sort of proud of my working class heritage, but if I'm the sort of person who's now looking at the cost per kilo of things I buy, I can only
100%.
imagine what people who, further down your economic scale are having to do,
Yeah. And it is crazy because when you think about it relatively, so, like, even, so I know the restaurants are kind of complaining about the costs and stuff, and I get it because obviously they're impacted by the food cost increases, the minimum wage is slightly increased, obviously then the employers' national insurance contributions is increased. And obviously the landlords hiked up the rents. Obviously, again, that never really made a huge amount of sense to me. And I think the thing I was thinking about the other day, love, is because the challenge with capitalism is the point of every participant in capitalism is to try and not just make profit, but to increase their profit year over year, right? And therefore, the only way that you can do that is by selling more stuff, increasing your prices, or reducing your costs, which typically tend to be people, so fire people or whatever. But the challenge is in this system, right? Because I was reading about house building and how house building's gotten more expensive. But in this system, if every single component company has to follow that methodology, isn't that why things just keep increasing? Right? Because you were saying on a different podcast, like the price goes up, but it never comes back down again.
Never comes back down. Yeah.
And that's why I was thinking, like, even if your guy who's making your bricks is like, oh shit, I only made 10K profit last year, I've got to make 20K, so let me increase my price. And then the guy who makes the cement, obviously the landowners, don't even get me started on land because I'm just going to go crazy. But anyway, the land, people who own the land, whatever they charge, the landlords, whatever, the selling the land, whatever, the councils are then trying to make money because they obviously are strapped for cash at the moment. Then the actual building company wants to make increasing profits, which is also why in the lease, they try to build more leasehold flats, because then they can do that bullshit ground rent thing that they created, which doubles the ground rent every year, which is essentially like trying to create, sorry, I'm being so finance about this, but it's essentially trying to create a recurring revenue model within house building. All of this comes back to the same source, doesn't it?
But this is the thing. Like, I'm like, maybe there needs to be like a better term for it, because I feel like maybe at one point capitalism wasn't as pernicious and evil as this. Maybe I'm just because I'm such a layman when it comes to economics that I always just go back to supply and demand. Like, okay, if there are fewer apples available, then the price of apples go up. But when there's abundance of apples, then the price has to come back down. And that's the way you never get to the point where there's just ridiculous prices.
100%.
That's the way you get to the point where prices do come back down. And it's not just pure inflation all the time. It's either really rapid inflation or just fast inflation. Like, it seems to be the only two examples of inflation that we have. I don't like, is supply and demand not capitalism, or is what we're experiencing like a perverse form of capitalism that we all just come to accept because the dominant forces say that this is the way it has to be?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really great question. I mean, I only did an economics degree, so I'd never call myself an economist, but supply and demand is the basic tenet of economics. And in this example of house building, there is an argument to say that house builders had an incentive to reduce the amount of houses being built because, exactly to your supply and demand point, the demand outstripped the supply and therefore it kept the prices higher. I don't know. I don't know, really.
And then if that's true, like obviously at one point social housing was the solution.
Exactly.
Like, can we go back to social housing? And again, I'm not saying that we need to have an answer for this, and I often come to you and be like, Mira, explain this to me. Like, please help me.
No. We do love, but I think the tricky thing, and this is what the government are finding as well, because again, ultimately you're trying to deal with capitalist house builders that want to maximize their profit, and you're asking them to build a proportion of those homes that are social housing, right? But the proportion of those quote unquote affordable homes rather are reducing as the years go on, because the capitalist house builders are pushing back because they want to make the most amount of money possible, right? To me, the challenges which will annoy a lot of people is because capitalism has gone so far now to the extremes, right? You cannot, that's like asking a serial killer to adopt some children and take care of them. Like that's insane. Like, you'd never do that. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So to me, I think the only solution, which I think is what Mamdani to a certain extent is trying to do in New York, right, is for the government to take ownership of it. And unfortunately we haven't yet found a good way of managing this, but a government building company that builds social housing. By building the social housing, you are increasing the stock of housing, will help to meet the demand, which would help to bring overall prices down. It also then creates affordable housing for people that actually need to live in it. And as you know, I'm hugely passionate about providing affordable housing or subsidized housing for police officers and like any public sector worker, like police officers, national health workers, all the people like bin men, all the people that do the public services, although I suppose that's been privatized now. But anyway, but I think that is, in reality, love, is the solution. But the challenge is that the privatization hasn't worked, as we've seen with water and all of the trains and all of that. It's been an absolute shit show because, again, to your point, it's very pernicious capitalism now. It's wealth extraction without any sense of responsibility or social responsibility. But government has also been wildly inefficient as well. So that's why people get nervous when you say government. My question is, are there not many of us that work within the capitalist structure that don't want to work in it anymore, to the extent that why wouldn't we set these things up? Take the experience of people who've worked in the private sector and have them working under government in creating these enterprises and these ventures that build the social housing, for example. Do you know what I mean? Like, is there a compromise to be had? I think they used to call them something before when it was like public-private partnership. But because the only other way to do this, love, is for a revolution where the vast majority of people whose capital is exploited turn around and say, this isn't acceptable anymore. And it has to force a conscience into the capitalists. Essentially, you have to force a social conscience. You have to force that sense of responsibility. And the reason that they're not doing it is because allegedly corrupt people like Trump are running things right now, and he doesn't give an F about anybody except growing him and his family's wealth. That's it. That's his singular goal and motivation. That's it. And I think that's where it's very difficult. But I always say, love, imagine a world where Bernie Zoran are running the US, Pedro Sanchez in Spain, maybe a Polanski coalition with Corbyn and Davey, I don't know, and like around the world, we actually had leaders that have moved away, forget right or left, that have actually genuinely have an interest in enriching the lives of their people. Could, as a world team, because we are so interconnected, could we actually achieve more? That's my dream, but I think I'm living in a fantasy land, obviously. But yeah.
I love that dream, and I will vote for you to be UK Prime Minister and make this dream a reality.
Mate, do you know what? Do you know how to realize that I could never do it? Because I watched Trevor Phillips yesterday and thought Zach Polanski handled himself so well. I think I might have punched him. And again, I say that as a pacifist. Like, just looked at him like, bruh, seriously, you're being ridiculous. I would have just walked off. Like, this is stupid, honestly.
I would get my vote. I'd be like, oh, he's amazing. This is exactly what we need in politics. All right, we are coming to the end of this podcast, and because I just love it, I'm going to inject comments into this final section. And I don't know if you've had a chance to look, but there are a few comments that I'm going to try and just read to you and get your hot reaction whilst we're recording right now. So the first comment was posted an hour ago. So literally just as we started recording. So this was on our short, was it a short? It was actually one of our longer clips. And it says, just remember, folks, the local issues are just a precursor to bigger things and active policies. However, illegal and uncontrolled immigration to the UK affects everybody. And that's in response to our UK elections protest vote versus local benefit video. So,
but okay, okay, fine. So firstly, the local councils don't have any say when it comes to immigration policy. So if your argument is illegal and uncontrolled immigration, they have zero remit, respectfully, on that. That's set at a government level. And actually, genuinely, your local, and I'm sure you know this, but your local council are responsible for your bin collection and your parks and your streets and your potholes, all of the things that actually affect us day to day, which is why we were both saying, like, it's understandable to get a protest vote, but actually, please don't, because actually this shit affects you on a day-to-day basis, right? The second thing is illegal and uncontrolled immigration are two different things. Illegal immigration is where people are seeking to come here without official approval to be here. So if you want to come to the UK, certain passport holders can without a visa. Other people have to get a visa to come here, right? These people that you're potentially referring to are people who maybe come here without those papers, but it is not illegal to claim asylum. So that's one thing. The second thing on uncontrolled immigration, we've never had uncontrolled immigration. Like, we've literally, this whole thing on the right about open borders is absolute bollocks. Forgive my language. We've never had it. You could never just rock up one day, get on a flight and land in England and be like, hey, I'm here. Like, that's never happened. What has happened is that because of Brexit, a lot of the Europeans went away that were helping to support, particularly the hospitality industry, the care, the National Health Services, etc. Those vacancies were created after Brexit. We needed to fill those vacancies, which is why under the Conservative government, including Suella Braverman, who's now in Reform, the number of net migration into the UK was higher. But under legal migration routes, people who were on visas, skilled visas that were filling jobs that were needed to be filled. So, like, if your argument is you don't want people to come and claim asylum, respectfully, you will never be able to stop that. Reform are lying to you because people are so desperate, they will find ways to better their lives and find safety. You will never, never, never stop that. You could decide to be the kind of person that wants to firebomb dinghies in the British Channel. You could be that person, but I would really ask you to look at yourself and think, is that really who we are? The other side of the equation is we do have vacancies. So if you don't want the migration to come in, which instantly will be zero this year, by the way, because we've had a lot less people wanting to come now because of the kind of draconian approach the Labour government have taken, then you also have to accept that you have a National Health Service that won't function properly because there will be delays because you just don't have enough people. Your elderly mother, if she goes into a care home, won't be taken care of as diligently because there's not enough staff to be able to look after her. When you go into a restaurant, it's going to be more expensive to eat out because you don't have this flow of young people that are happy to just fly in and just love to live in the city or the country and just happy to take like £15 an hour because they just want to get the experience. You're not going to have that. So it's fine to say you don't want it, but you have to recognize that there are trade-offs to it. That's all.
Brilliantly put. Worth adding that the UK and France struck a new deal to stop small boats, and the cost of that to UK is going to be £662 million. So if you're worried about the cost of people coming into the country, maybe you should also worry about the cost of trying to keep people out of the country, because it's 662 million. Like, how the fuck? It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. All right, there are a couple more comments. I'm going to maybe try and do two together. So this person commented twice on our full-length podcast. So clearly someone really engaged. I think you'll find these comments interesting.
Oh no. Is that like the English interesting when we mean like interesting?
100%. It's the English interesting.
Yeah.
So the first comment was 100,000 immigrants. Are you joking or just lying? England is full of millions of non-Europeans. And then wait for the second comment. The NHS started in 1948/49. It isn't just what England is. England has been around a lot longer. So clearly, for me, someone that is pushing for the NHS to be phased out and had an England without the NHS, because it only started in 1949 and there was an England prior to that, which is like trying to just keep it together. But I'm happy for you to respond first because I may not be able to articulate myself well.
Yeah, so fact checks. We did fact check. So 100,000 asylum seekers at the end of 2025 from the Office of National Statistics data, which obviously tracks all of this. So please do go and check. You don't have to believe us. Like you can obviously, please do check this yourself. Non-Europeans, yes, I understand the dog whistle. That means not white. And yes, there are, so 86% of the UK population is classified as white. The rest is actually not non-white, but the rest would not identify as white English. So that would be people like Fabian and myself who are English, but ethnically brown or black. There are people who are mixed race, so are half white, half another ethnicity. There are people that are mixed ethnicities, and then people that perhaps don't identify as white English, but white other, effectively, which is another category. But again, all on the census data for the 2021 census data with the 97% participation rate, which is a UK legally binding census that everybody has to complete. Completed in 2021. Please do go and check the Office of National Statistics, and you can validate, obviously, our figures as well. Non-European, non-white. I honestly, love, I don't know how you change that, to be honest with you, because I don't really understand why it's difficult to understand that we are born and raised here. A lot of us are second or third generation here. We attended the same schools as you. We attended the same universities. We work side by side. We live side by side. We know nothing else. Ethnically, my parents originally are from Sri Lanka and Malaysia. I have zero connection to Sri Lanka, unfortunately. I have family in Malaysia, but the Malaysian government consider me English British. They do not think I am Malaysian. So there is nowhere for me to go. And neither will I, because this is my country and I bleed English. You may not like it, but that's just the truth, love. I'm very sorry to tell you, that's just the truth. The National Health Service, again, please do go back and read why Bevan created it in the first place. But if you look at English society, particularly for those who are in the working classes, pre-1948, people died because they couldn't get access to the right healthcare and conditions that would save their lives. That's why the NHS is free at the point of use. The challenge with having something that you've been super lucky to live with for so long is that you in your lifetime will never know what it was like to not have it. And the only other thing I could recommend to you is, aside from obviously learning the history of the National Health Service, which I would like to educate myself more on, is look at other countries that have an insurance-based system, like America. The Americans are begging for a national health style system because just to give birth to a child, for example, say if this person has kids, it costs $20,000 to $30,000 in the US to give birth to a child. How much does that cost you in the NHS?
Super well put, Mira. As always, I guess the only thing I have to add to these is one, we are glad we are reaching people that think differently from us. And this is why, again, we want it to be a discussion, which is why, I'm happy that people are commenting so that we have an opportunity to have that discourse. I do wonder if some of these people, as you've mentioned in conversations we have, are just bots or are actively working for opposition parties and trying to just find content that is maybe too far to the left in their opinion and say things that maybe are disparaging or just counter to comments that we make. I don't know if this is like an active campaign that someone is supporting, whether it be a rogue state or actually, reform party sort of saying, okay, we're going to spend some money on digital or social content to make sure that these comments are placed on lefty content creators. Perhaps that's what this is, because it's if they have watched the video, as you said, we didn't make up the numbers. We put the numbers in the video. It's come from the Office of National Statistics. It's not just stuff we're pulling out because we have ethnic minority backgrounds ourselves. And so it's kind of weird to me that like our content is reaching these people because it's not like we look like reform candidates or reform voters. So how you clicked this video, sat through it and thought, this is something that is really interesting for me, is like, I don't know, maybe this is what reform voters like watching, like a black guy and a brown girl. Like maybe that's what they're into. And
And
it's
I'm
just that
impressed with you. I'm impressed with them, honestly. Like the fact that you even, I mean, sat through us waffling on when perhaps, I mean, ideologically, maybe you're just a middle of the road reform voter. I don't know, but I mean, respect to you for giving us, taking opportunity to listen to us. We really appreciate it.
and genuinely we really are trying to reach a wide audience, and so if this is working, then fantastic. um and if you're watching this and you do just like agree with it and are like supportive of the content, then maybe leave a comment as well, just so we know that you're out there and that we're not only reaching people on the right or far right of British politics. It would just be reassuring to know how the algorithm works, and maybe it's just people watching it and just aren't bothered because they're like, yeah, they're right, and I agree with them, and there's nothing more that I need to add to this.
Fair
So
enough.
perhaps that's what's going on. But either way, you know, we appreciate your support, however it comes.
Yes, yeah, no, we do, and it's great. It's really fascinating, isn't it? Like, and I was thinking a lot, love, because we obviously you and I both follow a lot of really, great journalists, like Zateo, Byline Times. I do read the Guardian, of course, even though it's not perfect. You've got the Telegraph as well, which I think is a really good source of something different. We also follow some really great creators, like even people like I know I talk about Hassan Piker a lot, but Hassan Piker, Zoran Mamdani, Bernie Sanders, some really great people out there. And I agree with you. I think because you agree with them, you're kind of like, oh, yes, great. But again, it provides a point of reassurance that you're not crazy, right? Which is why we set this whole thing up in the first place. Is sometimes it feels like even this week with everything that we just spoke about, with this very sad incident last week, sometimes when stuff is said, you're kind of like, wait, doesn't make any sense. Like, am I going crazy? So yeah. Anyway, so thank you.
This has been an awesome podcast, Mira. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your thoughts. Thank you for your intelligence. I really
You
love
too,
speaking
love.
to
You
you
too.
on our Mondays. So thank you. And
Thank you.
yeah, we will see you all next week, hopefully.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Bye.